Hello everybody. Welcome to UFO Enigma. I'm Ron Rickey, your host. On today's show, I think we're going to concentrate a little bit on contactees. Now, I touched on a couple of points at one of my other shows about Betty and Barney Hill. That was one of the most famous contact stories. But instead of going over old material, I dug up some new stuff, and the contact reports go back quite a way. I would say at least 100 years. And one of the most famous ones wound up with a sighting in Aurora, Texas. Now, this happened in 1897. Okay. Now, that's about what an artist's conception, taken from a drawing drawn at the time, what they were seeing in the skies. It lasted for a few months, this sighting, and most of the sightings were reported to be of cigar-shaped cigar-shaped ships with occupants visible, sort of like a dirigible. These objects were spotted in about a dozen different states, from California to Iowa, Kansas, Colorado, and like I say, the big one was in Aurora, Texas. Now, supposedly, the ship crashed. This was about the last sighting of this particular series of sightings. Everybody practically in this little town had seen the pilot. The pilot was killed, according to folklore. He was not only killed, but he was buried with a Christian burial in Aurora, Texas, and supposedly the grave site is still there, and Aurora is quite protective of their dead, I guess, because they will not let anybody near the town of Aurora Cemetery to check it out. And it was quite a thing. It supposedly hit a water tower and blew up. The townspeople picked up all the scrap pieces, buried them somewhere in the outskirts of town, and then buried the pilot. But let me see here. There's the ship. This is the town as it looks now, part of the town of Aurora, Texas. Like I say, anybody can go down here. This particular story was printed in True back in 74. And not only did it make an appearance over Aurora, Texas, but it even buzzed this courthouse in Denton, Texas, when they were dedicating the place, and caused quite a stir. They had the Texas Rangers after them. The governor was interested. Local police, sheriff's officials were all in the hunt here, and it was quite a story. This is downtown Aurora right here. Now, these ships not only flew over, but they were landing. They were talking to ranchers. One story was that a rancher named Alexander Hamilton and his son, this wasn't the president, no, this is just a rancher. They were on their ranch, and they happened to come across two of these men and their ship looking for water. They not only talked to them, they inspected the ship, supposedly. Were offered a ride, but I guess they just declined on that. But in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a few days before the ship crashed in Aurora, several citizens were reported to be asked aboard the ship, and did so. They went. No more was really heard of that story. But it's hard to disprove a story like that. Well, it's almost 100 years have gone by. And but it was sort of like the Roswell story of the 1800s. It just stuck around. The fact was, there is a cemetery there. There is a town there. You can go to the town hall and probably look up all the names of these people: Charles Johnson, Alexander Hamilton, Frank Nichols. They probably all owned ranches and farms in the area. It later was proven, well, not really proven, they said it was a hoax, but given the time, you know, with no TV, no radio, it just, you know, how would so many people, like from California to Iowa to Illinois, how could they get together in such a small amount of time to make a hoax like this? I think there was a few legitimate sightings. Then, of course, you know, people start talking, and someone says, well, maybe I saw something too, you know, and it's just, you know, you see it every day today. But in general, according to the True magazine, the man that reported this story, he said it was a lot of fabrications, but I always say that where there's smoke, there's fire. My second contact subject I touched on also once before, and it was Mr. Adamski. George Adamski. Now, this man had quite a time for himself. I showed this particular photo once before on another show. That one there was, they said, was pretty well faked. The cigar-shaped one was supposedly taken in the desert in the accompaniment of a friend of his, and it's neither been confirmed or not. It's still, it could be a UFO, could not be. Adamski started in the just about the time Arnold made his first sighting in '46. George Adamski came into the picture. He was a quite an interesting gentleman. He had no formal education, but yet some of his friends referred to him as Doctor. He went on a world tour that took him to many countries. He had books published in about 18 different languages, and he made quite a bit of money for the time, doing talks and probably radio programs at the time. And let's see, George claimed to have seen his first saucer in 1946. In 1947, him and his friend, they reported seeing no less than 184 sightings, in squadrons, mind you now. These were coming over in formations of 16, 18 at a time. 47 was quite a year for him. I think, now this one here was 52, so this will be one of his latest sightings. Now, 48, 49 were very lean years for George. He didn't report anything. 50, he reported white spots in space looking through his telescope. He had quite a good-sized scope. It was a 6-inch version, probably, of what you'd see in a astronomy store. 1951, things started really flying for George. He took over 700 photos. 18 of them were legible. And 1952 is when he supposedly met this gentleman right here. This is a painting that they did of him. He was a man from Venus. His name was Orthon, I believe. You're right, Orthon. Now, Orthon gave George a lot of misinformation. He claimed that every planet in the solar system was inhabited. including our moon. We know now that that's totally wrong. He said there was forests on the moon, vegetation, hidden water supplies, that he had seen these from aboard a flying saucer, not only with this man, but he saw him with two more that were Furcon and Zoal. So probably a lot of it was made up. It's probably another case where he saw something and just really took off on it. As I said on one of the other shows, he did mention the fireflies outside the window of the spaceship. Now, that hadn't been reported until about 11 years later when John Glenn went up. John Glenn reportedly described word for word what George Adamski saw when he supposedly went up with this fellow in this flying saucer. So you got all this evidence against him on one side, and then on the other side, you don't know. You say, well, he can say so many things. He's bound to hit on one or two items. But I'd leave that for you to figure out for yourself. I think myself he did see something, but not all that he did see. George also claimed that there was something like, at the time, 100,000 or 200,000 aliens living on Earth at the time in 1952. I don't know. I think I saw a couple of them today on 138. The lights there. That was in the 50s. Now we're getting up. We'll sort of skip the 60s, and I think the biggest one in the 60s was Betty and Barney Hill, but there was a very good one in the 70s. Okay, this was taking place in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Okay. We've got lots of goodies in this one here. The two occupants, or the two people that were captured, were Charles Hickson, who at the time was 45 years old, and Calvin Parker, who was at the time 19. Now this took place on October 11th, 1973, so we're getting up to more modern times here now. Okay, Parker and Hickson were fishing on the Pascagoula River. Now, let me see. Okay, there's about the spot where they were fishing right there. A bell-shaped or an egg-shaped UFO came down. When I read the story, they gave the dimensions as 8 feet in diameter by 8 feet tall, which to me was a little bit erroneous, because when they give the drawing here, if I turn it up this way, it'd probably be better. This looks more like your standard 35 to 40 foot flying saucer by about 10 feet tall, so probably in there, they're shocked. They were quite shocked. They went to the hospital. This is Hickson, this is Parker. These are the little guys that come out of the ship and grab them right here. What was interesting there was they sort of floated out of a hovering ship and actually didn't touch the ground when they walked. There you go. As they came over, they didn't walk, they actually just floated over and grabbed our two boys and took them up into the ship. Now supposedly they were on board for about 40 minutes. They were surrounded by 3 aliens who stood about 5 feet tall and were brought to an examination room aboard. I don't know if they have that, but let me see. Whatever it was, It was like a big hospital room. That sort of tells you too that the ship was much bigger than 8 feet in diameter. If they were examined aboard a ship that had enough room to put an examination room, and it had to be good size. So they were laying down, and they were more or less examined by this moving eyeball that came out of the wall of the ship. They weren't physically hurt. They were examined thoroughly for about 40 minutes. As far as from remembering the story, no one talked to them. They were just touched, and if they wanted to make them sit down, they'd just press down on them. No words were spoken. They were put right back on the same shoreline, unharmed, but totally in shock. But I think it was Hickson ran to his pickup truck and went for a quick nip to see if he could settle his nerves, which probably wasn't the best thing to do since he was going to go to the hospital and go see a doctor. They went to, let me see, I think they went to the hospital first, and then went to the sheriff. The hospital found them drug-free and radiation-free, both of them. As far as alcohol, it said in the book alcohol, but there again I found a little bit of a clash with, if one of them went to go get a drink and then went to the hospital, he should have had some trace of alcohol, but I believe that he was, both of them, I think they actually went through what they said they went through. The incident was reported nationwide, and finally was picked up not only by True, I think this was True magazine. Yeah, no, this was Saga. Saga ran this story. But Dr. Hynek and Dr. Hatter were two pretty well-known. In fact, Hynek is still well-known today. They represented the UFO faction of the story, and they put him under hypnosis, and it was their opinion that these men were telling the truth. Both these men, I understand, were doctors. They both had PhDs, and they knew their stuff. Now that report kept coming back and coming back. 74. They made headline news out of the story for about a year and a half. It was one of the big ones. There was a big flap in 74, and nationwide, and it sort of centered in around this Pascagoula sighting, although most of the country was reporting many UFOs. And to this day, it's up to the viewer whether they're telling the truth. I personally believe them. I don't think the men really had anything to gain by it. They were both employed. It wasn't as if they weren't employed, but they had jobs. They were just out for a day of fishing, and their lives were changed forever. Now, we have a real good story coming up too. Got a man called Travis Walton. This was on, they touched on this story on Robert Stack's show. I think it was last year. And Travis is still alive. He was only 22 years old then, so he's still a relatively young man. And this took place November 5th in 75. November 5th in 75, and a place near Phoenix called Snowflake, Arizona. Okay. Now, as it was reported on TV, it was Travis. His brother, I think, was with these people. There was 7 of them all together in a pickup truck. They were forestry workers. And they were coming back from a day's work in the Snowflake area. It was getting towards dusk, and as they're coming up through this desolate area, there's a UFO blocking the road. Well, they couldn't get around it, so they had to stop. And Travis always told his mother, you know, if a UFO captures me, don't worry, because I will be all right. Travis was really into UFOs before this happened. So they stopped the truck. Let's see if I can get a shot here of the area they were in. All right, there's a good picture of Travis. Right there. That wasn't the actual spot, though. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. See, it was a heavily wooded area. There was snow on the ground at the time. The men just stood there for a while in the truck looking. All of a sudden, Travis bolts out of the truck. He said, I got to get a closer look at this, in so many words. Now, his friends were absolutely dumbstruck. They didn't know what to say. He ran right up to this thing, ran under it, and right in front of everybody, a big blue ray zapped him. Now, you can imagine the horror. There's a man floating in midair underneath the UFO, and totally helpless, and they're helpless to do anything about it. They decided to get out of there. So we can't help it. Let's move. Let's get out of here. So they turned the truck around, headed back where they came from, and they went down the road a mile or so and said, "Gee, we shouldn't have left him. You know, we had to go back and see if we can help him out." Well, they went back, and there was absolutely nothing, no trace of what had happened. The ship had not landed. Evidently, the ray that picked up Travis didn't melt the snow or anything. And so they scouted around a little bit on their own. You know, within maybe a half a mile, everybody went off in pairs, and they decided to see if they could find him. Maybe he was, you know, dazed and laying in a snowdrift or something. Nothing. He couldn't be found. Well, when they did decide to go to the sheriff, they were pretty shaken and nervous, and they sort of, to the sheriff, looked a little bit guilty. They said, you know, here there's 6 men here, and one of their best friends is gone, and they were actually a little bit suspecting foul play. Later on, they gave the 6 men had given were given lie detector tests. Everyone passed on the story, all 6. What they saw, they all saw, and the sheriff made a massive search, called for dogs, called for jeeps and 4-wheels and snow machines and stuff. Couldn't find them. The men were taken back to the police station, and they were released, but no Travis was to be found at all. And things were starting to look a little bit hairy there when Travis's brother got a phone call 5 days later. It was Travis, and he was just outside of town, and he was mumbling and he barely coherent, and he says he would like to be picked up. His brother went and got him, and he brought him to the hospital. He was in a state of shock after 5 days, dehydrated. And mumbling that he had been taken aboard a flying saucer. Now, this story here raged. The National Enquirer got a hold of it, and they decided to form a panel of their own. Now, they were going to use a couple of psychiatrists on the side of, say, the anti-UFOs. In other words, saying Travis was, he wished so much that he had wanted to see a flying saucer. He actually saw it. He actually believed he saw it, so in truth, he was telling the truth, but it never happened. Dr. Harder, again, was in on this case here. He totally disagreed. Dr. Harder said, granted, Travis, I guess, had had a very, very hard life. His real father had deserted the family. His mother tried to raise 6 kids, I think of which he was the youngest, by herself. She had married another man, and they got deserted again. The psychiatrist says the man was just, you know, he wanted so much for more than what he really had. And they said that was the reason, you know, he saw the whole thing. So in his mind, everything that happened was true. But Dr. Harder says, how do you explain, though, the perfect description that fits so many other descriptions of the man that captured him? This was only one of them. They said one of the men in the ship was quite human-looking. Didn't have the big head, didn't have the big black eyes. It was, you know, just normal features. Well, the Harder says the psychiatrists were totally biased. They says, how can they tell if a man had seen a flying saucer when they started off not believing in UFOs anyway? It's sure that they're not going to, you know, they'll say, yeah, he thinks he saw something. And the thing was, though, it was enough. Harder's story was enough to set the wheels going at the Inquirer, and they got themselves a big, big scoop there. And that was in '75. Now, I'm going to touch just a little bit for about a minute on the Gulf breeze. It seems like it's still in the news in Florida. If anybody was watching TV last week, Hard Copy had more footage, about 10 minutes of video cams and eyewitness reports, and it seems like it's still a place to go if you really want to. I'd love to get down there in the next couple of months myself if I could, and get a first-hand report. It's quite exciting. I got a call the other night because of the show saying that he had the explanation of the Gulf breeze, and that it was a secret plane from the Air Force. But he had no. I mean, I asked him to call back. I asked to meet with him. He said he had pictures and stuff, but I never got anything out of it. So it's just another call. But I would really love to go down and see. And for a report that's been going on since '88, not one contactee report yet. All these sightings, it's amazing. They've seen ships landed, and as far as I know, they've seen no occupant sightings whatsoever. In this last minute or so, I'd like to ask the viewers, you know, if anybody out there has had a sighting, whether it be, you know, whether you've come in from out of state and have seen something 10, 15, 20 years ago, I'm very interested in it. Take the whole thing down, and maybe we can match it up to sightings that have been written down in print. And who knows, these people might have been wondering what they've seen for the past 15, 20 years, and maybe they actually, you know, can stop being bothered by it. I know there's plenty of sightings here in Massachusetts in this area, and my phone number will be listed right on the bottom of the screen. It's 344-2367. And with that, I think maybe we'll wind it up. Have a good one.